Hello guys and welcome to my new video. This is a new completely format. We're going to be talking about the World First Race. We have a list of questions, we have a list of discussion points. We'll be talking about the classes, we'll be talking about Battle of Dazar'alor in terms of how each of the boss was, whether it was fun, whether it was good, how he was cheesed by guilds like Method, Limit and things like that. And there's a lot of things to talk about, and I'm going to introduce my analyst for the day, Paperkut.
Hello, my fellow nerds.
So
I'm glad to be here.
There you go. So I say analyst because unfortunately I'm not able to watch the streams. World First Race was, let's say, it was streamed by a lot of guilds. A lot of the top end guilds are deciding to stream content and things like that, which is really cool, but I don't get to watch as much of it. I don't get to see all the crazy strats. I don't get to see a lot of the stuff. And Paperkut watches all of it. He watches all of it, and he knows quite a lot about it. And I ask him sometimes in terms of how they cheese each of the strats and things like that. So just today we saw that there were a lot of guilds, a lot of additional guilds who got to Jaina Mythic. So we saw Alpha, which was quite crazy because this is a Chinese guild that I think they start 16 hours after Europe. So
on Thursday.
So they have a quite of a late start, and they actually end up grabbing world third for Mythic Jaina. And then you saw Pieces again. Pieces was supposed to be, you were telling me about this, Pieces was supposed to be quite a casual guild in terms of
it's not casual, but in terms of how many hours they raid, they're casual. But in terms of preparation, obviously they prepare a lot as well. So
do you know how much time they spend on it actually?
I know on Wednesday they raided like the full day since the release, since the whole opening of the raid. And then Thursday and Friday and Saturday, they're just normal hours, I think from 6 or 7 up to like midnight.
So it's actually pretty cool though to see something. I mean, it's not like guilds like Method and Limit, they raiding, 16 hours per day. So the only time they're not raiding is when they're sleeping. And they sometimes take like, half an hour break or something to eat food and things like that. So, it is quite impressive to see Pieces of it. Then you saw Fat Shark, and then you saw Exorsus. Exorsus taking World 6th is pretty, how do I say it? Is it what they expected? You were telling me that they were going a bit more casual as well.
Yeah, but like the older raid, like Exorsus were third, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So it's obviously disappointing for them to be what, 6th or 5th?
6th.
6th. That's pretty disappointing for them, I guess.
We
don't know what the situation is, and maybe I don't really know.
I mean, all of them, like there were like so many guilds that got the world first today. So it's the difference between the difference between the 3rd and the 6th is not that big. But let's talk about the thing that we wanted to really talk about. Method getting the world first. Did you expect Method to get the world first?
Absolutely I did. Because Limit probably should have won the last time in all there, and they kind of threw it away, and I just knew they're gonna throw it away again.
I mean, it was. I honestly, for the people who watched it, I think there's a lot of people who end up watching the World First Race. I have some statistics here as well. You can actually see it. There were tweets from the Esport Observer. They were looking at the breakdown of hours watched per Twitch channel, and the Method got even better numbers than did on the first race. Because
really?
this is the second time Method is streaming the World First Race, and the first time they streamed, the production values, the production values were pretty, it was mainly just individual streamers streaming, and this time around you can see the numbers, like Method channel was insane, and then you can see like things like Sko being really up there, like more numbers than Shroud. Then you can even see Method Josh being in there as well. The numbers were insane, and you can see why, because in the second time they were doing it, we can talk about the Red Bull and the whole Method production values thing. The second time around, they had like a full-on team. Like this was an insane. I don't know how much money they put in. I don't know how much money Method put in, or Red Bull, their sponsors. They had so many sponsors for this, and it felt like a real esport event for the first time, because PvE to some extent is not really. I mean, MDI was really popular, but do you think, like, I honestly was kind of wondering, why is Blizzard not sponsoring these kind of events? I mean, Method, I think they got all the money from all their sponsors, because MSI and things like that, they were promoting their own products, and there were tons of others. But why would Blizzard not make an actual raid? Like, why wouldn't they actually get into this kind of deal? Because it promotes the game.
It's really weird. I think they really should help Method, because it's gonna promote the game as well. Like it's their game, like, and the more viewers, the more attention that the game has. But I think I think they just want to see how this goes off, like see how Method can do. Like if it's gonna be really well, I think next expansion they're gonna go all in and help them. I honestly think so. There's no way they're not gonna do anything, or even next raid tier. I wouldn't be surprised if Blizzard actually tried to help them.
I guess one of the things is also another question is, I understand why they did it in the past, but the simultaneous release of the raid. So the way that you have it right now, North America has like a 16-hour head start, then Europe begins, and then Asia has a 16 hours later. Is there, like, I mean, if they, in my opinion, if they really want to make this like a real esport way, or like an esport tournament, they, in my honest opinion, they're capable of doing a simultaneous release of the raid tier, so all of the continents are able to log in at the same time, because they did the same thing with BfA launch. BfA launched at the same time for everybody, and that probably saw the most amount of players playing. Servers were really heavily under load, which I understand back in the day they did it because the servers couldn't really hold the, couldn't cope with the numbers, but I feel they could really do it right now. Do you think next year should be released at the same time?
Absolutely, and I think it will be. Honestly, the final raid, I say, not the next tier, the Crucible Storm. I think it's the two bosses, but the next one, I think it might be actually released worldwide, because I just don't see any reason. Like Method multiple times stated they were really upset about that the whole release is staggered, and I don't know. Blizzard can't keep delaying and this from happening, because like you said, the whole BfA launch was released all at the same time, and that's BfA launch is far more players playing than people who do mythic, because like there's not that many people who actually do the mythic content. If you just release it just for the mythic raid release, not the actual heroic, but just for the mythic, that's what I feel it should be done.
But I guess there'll be also a question of how many guilds want to actually stream the content, because we see Method is doing it, we see Exorcist is doing it, I think Pieces was doing it. I think a lot of the people are getting on board, because to be a professional, I'm not even gonna say professional gamer, I'm not gonna even say professional streamer, because a lot of the players here, a lot of the players don't even stream the content, because some of them don't stream the content, and some of them are forced to stream, in my opinion, are forced to stream the content, because a lot of the people who are able to play 16 hours a day for 1 or 2 weeks, or like months and whatever, they need to have some sort of income. They need to get some sort of money. So you'll see now that most of the Method people will be streaming. They'll be using streaming as almost like their job at some point, and this will allow them to play the game 16 hours a day. I don't see a reason why Limit wouldn't do it. Like I've thought about this quite a bit. So Limit said it before. Limit didn't want to stream the content because they're 16 hours ahead of everyone else. Because they're the best North American guild. They're the best North American guild, and they will be ahead of everybody else. Method can sit and watch their stream and analyze the strats that they're doing because they have a 16-hour head start. So I can see why they were saying. I saw a clip of them saying it, that they didn't want to do it because people are going to copy their strats. When Europe gets released, you get all the the second you get some of the top guilds released at the same time, so they're all kind of competing at the same time. So I can see why Limit said they didn't want to stream, but also if Blizzard at some point really does the simultaneous release, I would really like to see limit streaming as well, and then possibly if you have like a top 5 or top 10 guilds in the world streaming at the same time, Blizzard could have some sort of production value in terms of like, you know, giving highlights to each of the stream and things like that to each of the guild, and really kind of not monetizing but promoting the game. And I feel at this point BfA needs as much promotion as possible, and the few things that are really good with BfA in my opinion, raiding and maybe Mythic Plus as well. And I feel, I'm not sure about the PvP yet, but I feel they really need to promote that. But either way, we spent quite a bit of time on talking about the production values. I'm really happy Method end up streaming the whole content, because I feel to some extent the people who don't even play World of Warcraft, they'll tune in and they'll just watch it. Even people who don't watch or play World of Warcraft, they'll find it interesting to see what it takes from the, you know, world first streamers. And the next thing I want to talk about is some of the crazy preparation for world firsts. So there was a big hype happening about Limit when Limit transferred from Horde to Alliance, because the Alliance had that, I can't remember the name of the quest, the PvP quest where you kill 20 Hordes or whatever,
Yeah.
and you get a 400 item level. And at that same time on on American servers, only American servers, because they got the Warfronts at the given time, and Alliance also had the Warfront, which also gave you the 400 item level gear. So Limit ended up transferring. Now I don't know the exact facts of it. It wasn't as crazy as the whole guild with all the alts. I think it was less than that, but they ended up transferring to Alliance, and getting the item and then transferring back. And a lot of go on.
I don't know. It was crazy. I guess, you know, if you're competing for world first, it's obviously a huge advantage to have those, because it's also the Warfront eye level as well, the Warfront item as well. I think it was 400. So you actually had two 400 eye level items. So it is definitely worth it to transfer if you had the money. But it's kind of, you know, a bit, you know, gray on the line. Like,
Do you think so? I actually, at the first time I heard about this, I was like, okay, they're a world first guild. They have a lot of gold in the bank because, you know, they do a lot of boosts and things like that. So I was like, if you have the gold, why not do it? I think they said, I can't remember how much gold they spent on it. But if you have the gold, why not do it? And then I realized after there were Twitch clips and things like that from Method members talking about their preparation. And it's less visible until this clip was released, because when this clip was released, I think it was Method Josh who said it about the preparation that they do, where they have like 5 alts, maxing all of the professions that give you items like engineering, alchemy, and jewel crafting like the alchemy trinket, equipping it on your alt, and then going to another profession just because
just delete the profession and then create another one.
Yeah, just to have items equipped. The game registers once you have the game will register on each slot when you have the highest item equipped in that slot. So you just have to equip it in your trinket slot. You can remove it or whatever, and then you can go do heroic dungeon or heroic split raids. And then if an item drops for you, even though it's the highest item level technically, you are able to trade it. And they did that for like 5 different alts and stuff like that. They said they spent like, I don't know, like 50 million, 100 million or something gold like that. And after I heard that, I was like, okay, so the limit transfer to Alliance was actually a tiny portion. And a lot of people were actually saying it. I'm not sure if this is confirmed yet, but I think one of the limit guides said that one of the reasons they weren't able to kill Jaina that fast is because their item level was considerably lower than Method's one. Method actually had
Method were still higher. The item level was still higher than Limit's when they reached Jaina.
So is there a reason for Limit not to copy Method's strategy for the next tier?
I'm pretty sure they knew this. The strategy is well known amongst like hardcore raiders. Like I'm sure they known it. They could have done it, but they obviously it requires immense amount of time. That's why I thought like the transfer, you know, from Alliance to Horde to get the 2 free items. That's kind of like, you know, cheating, because it doesn't require that much effort. All you need is gold. But to do what Meta did, to level 3 professions, jewel crafting on every single card, on every single alt. So I think it's like 3 alts for every single one, and then to create the item, and then that requires so much effort. Like,
Do you
I
really think
can't
that's
imagine.
cheating? Do you really think that's dodgy? I don't think that's dodgy at all.
No, I think that the
The
transfer
transfer.
from Horde to Alliance is dodgy and kind
I
of
don't
cheating.
think so.
I think it is. It's far too easy. Like, it doesn't require any effort, basically.
I really wonder what the chat and the viewers and YouTube and things like that will think about transfer from, because guilds have been doing the transfer from alliance to horde or from server to server. Remember back in the day, I can't remember when it happened, but when the raid lockouts were used to be bugged when you transferred servers. So guilds would actually do like a heroic split or something, and then they transfer their whole guild to another server, and the raid lockout will be fresh, so they can do that heroic run
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
That used to happen.
It's crazy. Not only that, like they would buy from 3 different servers. They would buy all these crafting materials because they need to do mythic zeros for the, what's the item called?
Oh yeah,
The
title core.
Hydra cores, and then obviously kill the bosses, specific bosses that gives you the boss family of
Breath.
breath or something like
Yeah,
that.
that's to
So
craft the items. Yeah, yeah.
to craft items, and
So
there's not enough. It was told that it was not enough materials from one server, so you had to go to 3 different servers to buy and literally empty all the auction house
but that's not
to
the
buy
title
these
course.
crafting materials.
Yeah, the mythic zeros for the title course, breath plus handy. So I think you have to do like mythic zeros on like 3 alts, like 10. Like it's insane. We're talking about some insane number. Like when you really think about it, in my mind, when I really think about the mythic race, when I think about when a person gets invited to the mythic race, you as a viewer, you can be like, oh, that's cool, the guy got invited and stuff like that, and then you think about the hundreds of hours of doing tedious nonsense, mythic zero runs on like 1,000 hours of freaking island expeditions, all of this stuff to be
Don't
able to
forget
get into
about
it.
the neck eye level as well.
The neck item level. So when you really think about it, the amount of effort that you have to put in to be able to, and then at some time maybe your class is not that great for a certain boss, and you have to sit out. Maybe the strategy doesn't work for your class, and then you're like imagine being benched as a player because you're playing a suboptimal class or something. I know multiple of the players will have 3 alts and things like that, but a lot of the times, some of those alts, like for example, melee might not be viable at all. And the way that top guilds usually do is that if you're a melee player, they might have melee backups and stuff like that. But imagine being benched after spending like this amount of effort. It's to some extent, it feels like you need to have some dedication to be the world first in this. And like, congratulations to Method and all of the guilds. All of the guilds.
One of the mages, I can't remember his name for Method. He basically was the highest neck level on like one character. I think it was 44. The requirement for Method was to reach 42 on mains in eye level, neck level, and he was 44. And then his other alt was also like 43. Was insane amount of farming. He was by far the most eye level and farm he did in all the characters, and he didn't get to raid the Jaina kill just because he was playing a mage and they only brought one mage for the intellect buff, and the mage
Scribe,
was the raid leader,
yeah.
Scribe. So obviously he couldn't take his spot. So it's honestly, when you think about it, when you put this much effort and then you don't get to raid, like that's horrific.
It is pretty crazy. Okay, let's talk about the dedication. I think we covered that. The dedication of a Mythic World First player, which is actually pretty crazy. Let's talk about Battle of Dazar'alor. Let's talk about just the raid itself. How do you feel about having watched multiple streams from different things, all the bosses? You get to see the different strategies that each of the guilds go with and things like that. How do you feel about the raid in itself?
I think it was overall a very fun raid. I think it was undertuned for many of the bosses, but overall, like in terms of fun, it looks really great, and especially Jaina just looks absolutely amazing.
Are you not
Boss
sad
fight.
about the fact that it doesn't have a secret phase?
No, this is no. Jaina, the boss in itself is just absolute. I would say one of the top 2 boss or top 3 boss in WoW. I would say. So why?
Really?
Yeah, in like in terms of mythic, watching it, I think is so many cool mechanics. So, and it could have been much harder, but we'll get to that later. But
We can get to that. We can talk about Jaina. We can talk about the cheese mechanics of Jaina as well. Actually, yeah, we can cover Jaina. We can talk about the trolls, the troll passive, the reduction in movement impairing effects.
That should not like that was that should have been hotfixed. That's a huge thing to not get stacks in the last phase because the whole tactical method was to just burn the last phase, basically ignore the ad, the elemental ad, interrupt it, and just nuke Jaina. So they just brought in as many kind of execute classes and any kind of best unused trinkets, just to burn it. But the whole point that the passive, the racial from trolls, basically you get less stacks because of it. The chilling
Yeah,
debuff that
yeah.
you get less stacks because it's 20% less slow, which is also counts as a debuff. So you
It's
actually
kind of weird though when you think about the Jaina's debuff and that it actually interacts with
yeah.
anything that reduces movement speed.
But
Or
the whole point, the debuff was that it reduces movement speed, but also it does insane amount of damage.
yeah,
But so anything more like 9 stacks or something like that, was it 20 stacks and you get
it's stunned.
frozen.
Yeah.
So literally that was the enrage. They were fine with the actual enrage timer, which is 12 minutes I think it was. They killed in like 11 minutes. They were no near to enrage. It's the 20 stacks. Once they reach 20 stacks, they all get in the bubble. That's it. There's not they wipe. So that whole troll ratio, I think, was a huge deal, like absolutely huge deal.
Do you think a lot of the I'm imagining that a lot of the guilds here probably rewrote the trolls as well. I'm actually wondering if guilds like Pieces, Exorsus, Fat Shark, yes, and things like that, if they all had to rewrote the trolls for this, because I feel like if they did, maybe
No.
at this early stage, I mean, I'm sure that in a couple of weeks or a month, Jaina will probably be nerfed to account for that, or maybe in some way change because the ratio does seem pretty strong. Is there any other cheeses that were used in the Jaina fight? I can't remember now.
Um, I guess the vote phase where the ads spawn, you mind control it and use the mind control to pick up the barrel to throw it off, which is kind of weird. Like it's not really cheese because it's not gonna make it that much
Oh, that's in phase
better.
one.
That's phase one, yeah.
Yeah, but no one cares about the phase one, right? It's the
Well,
easy phase.
overall the boss fight isn't like insane like hard in terms of like the numbers. Like the wall, when you have to kill the wall, like it's not that, it doesn't have that much HP. Like many guilds could kill it, like it's no problem. It's really just the mechanics. That's what makes the whole fight of the mechanics in the mythic phase, where you have to stack with 3 people or 5 people depending on percentage. Like that's what makes it really difficult. And the intermission phases as well. Like the intermission phase, I say, is the biggest struggle for any guild that's going to be doing it. It's the intermission phase. That's where they're going to have the most wipes.
Yeah, there's also the thing, the Janus half-hand that lets you. It was kind of famous thing, the Janus half-hand that
Yeah,
reduces
yeah.
or increases your how much you can see while in those phases as well.
Well,
I've
there
heard
was a huge. Well, that's another one. The aspect of the hawk, or I think the hunter
the sight,
ability.
spectral sight. No,
Yeah,
I can't remember what it was called, but
it removes like the blurred vision that you get in intermission. You can
yeah,
see it clearly.
yeah,
Everything.
it's shamans can do it as well. I can't remember the exact names for the abilities, but
Yeah, I can't
shamans have
remember.
it, hunters have it, and you're also able to see the abilities that are coming towards, even when the vision is blurred and things like that. So those are, I think, the main cheeses that I heard about. The troll racial, that was big. The hunter side and the shaman side, that was pretty big as well. But overall, it was like crazy amount of healing, crazy amount of DPS at the very end to really burn through, and they went through a lot of different combinations of healers. It was interesting to see some of the healer setup. Like I know from Method, they went with double Discipline Priest and double Resto Shaman, and it was interesting to see. It was interesting to see that a lot of the other guilds, like Limit, went with a completely different comp. They had a Resto Shaman in it. They had a Resto Shaman, but they
What
also had
comp
a
do they go
Mystery.
with?
They had two Resto Shamans, Mystery Monk, and a Resto Druid.
The Resto Sham, two Resto Shams is absolutely a must. Honestly, for the links in the wall phase and the last phase. Like it's not the wall phase, the first after intermission, and then the last phase. But the only reason they bought disc is really for the damage. because the two discs were basically doing one DPS, DPS
Yeah,
damage.
because the DPS check was so tight. It was actually interesting to see the tank combinations. What they had a Prot Paladin with the Grace of Justicar trait that judging a foe heals up to 10 allies within 8 yards. And the guy was stacking 3 of those for the extra healing. I actually wonder how much the Prot Paladin how much healing the Prot Paladin end up doing out of those traits. It's actually quite interesting. I would love to see the healing meters just for that. I can actually check out, because I actually haven't seen what Alpha went with. Oh, you can't. Well, you can't see it. There's a weird leaderboard thing for the Asian guild, so you can't really see it. But let me see what Pieces went with for the Mythic encounter. They went with, wow, they actually copied. Wow, they went with 5 healers. That's so interesting. Double Resto Shaman, double Discipline Priest, and Holy Paladin. There's not many Holy Paladins in the last couple of bosses.
I guess the tank damage was insane.
Yeah. So what do you think? What do you think? Actually, we talked about Jaina straight away, but what do you think about the other bosses? What do you think about the Blockade? What do you think about Mekkatorque? I felt that those bosses were quite interesting as well.
I don't know. The Mekkatorque was just, the whole design is really fun. Like very unique, and the more the better. Like honestly, these kind of fights, even if it was like easier, it's still fun to have these kind of mechanics that's so new. And because a lot of them raid mechanics are being reused constantly, and you get kind of bored of it. So it's obviously refreshing to have some kind of crazy mechanics like that, like with the whole colors. But I would say Mekkatorque was extremely fun to watch, like especially to watch. Blockade doesn't look that great, to be honest. Blockade wasn't, especially it was cheesed a lot as well. With like, it wasn't really intended. Like they bloodlust on the bridge, like because the last phase wasn't really that hard. Like I don't think it was intended like that. And plus, you're supposed to go 2 tanks, but you could, because the melee range from the boss hitbox was so big. You basically just have the one tank and the other tank soak. Like it wasn't intended. There was a lot of things that wasn't intended with that boss. Like could have been a lot harder if it was fixed properly.
Yeah, I've heard the Blockade. I've seen some with videos. I don't know if I want to show the video on the thing right now, but there was a lot of different cheeses for the Blockade. Did you expect, like, when I talk about difficulty of the raid, when I say difficulty of the raid, there's a lot of people who'll be watching and be like, oh, Method nearly killed this in one, or like, to some extent, before European servers were even up, people were already kind of concerned about the fact that Limit might even kill all of the bosses before Method can even have a chance of entering the mythic dungeon.
Yeah, it was a legitimate concern. Yeah,
it was a legitimate concern, but at the same time, it's very similar to what Antaurus was. In Antaurus, it was Agramar who was a little bit harder. Everyone else was pretty easy. Coven of Shavaris back in the day was probably easier on Mythic than it was on Heroic. The mechanics were just really, really stupid in Mythic 1. And then Argus was extremely hard. That took a lot of tries. And in this Battle of Dazar'alor, you can say that maybe to some extent Mekkatorque can be a little bit harder, maybe to some extent Blockade can be a little bit harder, but not Agramar. I guess not Agramar kind of difficulty, a little bit less, but then Jaina is pretty hard. But how do you feel about like, I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, the raid tier can be cleared in one day. You have to remember the preparation that these guys and girls put into. They probably test these bosses before PTR. Blizzard either has to, like, the only way for Blizzard to stop people from progression is to put insane damage checks, and even damage checks are becoming harder to do because most of these guilds will have like close to optimal or very decent gear.
I think the whole raid was fine. The difficulty was fine, except that a lot of the boss were cheesed. Like I said, Stormwall Blockade. So many things could have been cheesed on that boss, like the safe spot in last phase that you could blow us on the phase 1. Like if these were fixed, that boss could have been extremely hard. I say 100 pulls or 150 pulls if these were fixed. And the same thing with the what's the boss called? Even though it's kind of early boss, Jade Fire Masters.
We can actually put in a little a little bit of the blockade thing where people are not aware of it. So you're talking about the second phase where you can stay, or where most of the guilds stay on the left side completely. Is that what you're
the
talking
safe
about?
spot on the basically, and also it's also because you can stack a lot because you bring loads of dot classes. You literally just there was barely any melee. I think it was like one melee. You bring just a DH, I think. Most of the guilds brought and multiple dot classes like boomkins just to slowly kill the ads while DPSing the boss at the same time. That's what made it super easy. But also the main one is the safe spot and also the tank. I'm not 100% sure how it works, but from what I heard is that you
Like
can
you see
one
this, it
tank.
didn't hit. It didn't hit on the thing. That's so weird. Like
Yeah, you don't take damage on that safe spot there. But also you can one tank it basically. You legit can one tank, and it was not intended. I don't exactly know how it works, exactly how it is. I know for sure that you can literally one tank this boss, and the other tank just soaks. Like it's not supposed to be intended. If those were fixed, that could have been an extremely difficult boss. It's the same thing with Jadefire as well. Jadefire is just the best example you can have. It legitimately completely ignore mechanics. Like you just nuke down the monk and ignore the mage.
but that's only in
Mechanics at all.
heroic.
Huh?
Like, are you talking about skipping the charges?
No. You're supposed the whole boss fight is you're supposed to kill them at the same time. You're supposed to get them down low at the same time. So if you kill one early, the other guy is obviously empowered, and his abilities are empowered. Depends which guy you kill first, but it's usually the kill monk first because he's the more difficult one. The mage, when you kill the monk, the mage does like a ticking damage, AoE damage, and it does nothing. It's not high damage at all. You can literally heal through it. That's not intended. They were supposed to both kill at the same time. That's how it was in PTR, and in beta testing of the encounters, but for some reason it was not tuned correctly. The mage just didn't the abilities that he was using was not significant, so it was not worth killing him as well.
Maybe
Killing him
it's
at the same
because it's
time.
just the second boss.
It was the third boss.
No, not for Alliance.
Is it?
Alliance get the Jadefire second. Jesus, the Alliance horde.
Really? Oh yeah, I'm looking at the horde one, but it's still like it still shouldn't be like that. Like it could.
No, there were a lot of, like, I'll be completely honest with you. Just me rating Mythic on the first week or something like that. There were a lot of more bugs than in Uldir. Uldir, in my opinion, was an okay raid. I thought it was a pretty decent raid, but then when Battle of Dazar'alor came about, I was like, oh, Uldir is actually super average in terms of the boss mechanics and things like that. I really think, like, I got sick of Gahoon so fast. The orb carrying thing was actually interesting on paper, but then after like hundreds and hundreds of vibes, it becomes really boring because you bring in new people, you need to teach the new people, then you bring another new people, someone takes on holidays, you need to get someone new, they need to be taught about it. You fail once, it's all a wipe. It was really unforgiving and really just boring at the very end. But in Battle of Dazar'alor, I feel, at least for the Mythic rating, there were so many bugs with it. We as a guild, and I know a lot of people experienced this as well, with Opulence, there was like a server-wide lag happening.
That's actually funny because that from what I was heard, that lag was caused by Blizzard were trying to fix the Stormwind blockade bugs, and that's what caused it. And it also caused the Jaina hotfix. It wasn't intended. The Jaina hotfix the last elemental
Was introduced.
yeah, exactly. That's what caused it. That's what from what I heard, that's what actually caused when they were trying to fix the Stormwind blockade bugs. They unintentionally caused other errors on other bosses.
That's so interesting because when we were doing Opulence, we had server lag issues for like 3 hours. I heard guilds were doing that, and then when we went to King Rastakhan is supposed to transfer the people in the downstairs realm when he reaches 50%.
Yeah,
50%, and he wasn't doing that. The boss was like 40%, and he wasn't he was just staying there. Like everyone was staying in the downstairs area for the whole duration of the fight. And this was happening.
Making changes live, like that's what.
Yeah, this was happening when Jaina was getting tons of hotfixes, like at the exact same time. And people were talking about the Jaina hotfixes, and we were like, "What's going on with these bosses?" So you think that when Blizzard was doing live changes for other bosses, that somehow affected the rest of the dungeon? That's really interesting.
I'm 100% because I looked at it was a tweet by I think it was Slutbag or something, and he said that that's what was causing it. And I'm sure he talked to the Blizzard or something about it, because he wouldn't tweet like that for no reason.
Okay. So I experienced, at least I experienced personally, a lot of bugs and issues with the mythic encounters. A lot of these, like, you won't even notice these issues in heroic, because if they're not that groundbreaking, like, you can push it through, it doesn't really matter that much. But if you're doing it on mythic, any of these kind of bugs and it's a wipe or like a block and you can't do anything. So that's actually, besides the bugs, I felt the dungeon, I felt the raid, Battle of Dazar'alor was really, really interesting. To some extent, I get your point when you say Mekkatorque, I always call it.
Mekkatorque.
An interesting concept, and I do feel it's a really interesting concept. For the people who don't know what Mekkatorque does, it kind of requires you to have a microphone. For the first time ever, you will have to be social in an MMO game, which is super weird. I don't think, what the hell, man?
Funny, like, story. That method initially, the reason why they were wiping so much, from looking the stream and afterwards when they killed it, like the raid leader Scribe was talking about as well, and they basically intended to use like a WeCore for the colors.
Yeah.
To not actually, like,
there was a WeCore. I know that.
Huh?
There
was a WeCore. They created a WeCore because that was at the very start.
Yeah.
But the WeCore wasn't working.
No, this is what happened in PTR. There was a WeCore that basically allowed you to just press the buttons without ever talking anything, and everything was handled by this WeCore. And when the game went live, Blizzard broke the APIs, broke the functionality of it, so it wasn't being able to cheese it. And I completely agree with it, because if they make a WeCore that basically completely negates the whole concept of the fight, that fight would just require one thing, and that's installing WeCores and getting this particular WeCore to beat this boss.
But it is funny, because you would think the method, would be really good with communication, like, because they did wipe 56 times on Mekkatorque, and like Limit wiped like 20 times. So they were struggling a lot on Mekkatorque. And you could see it on the meta stream, you could see it when they killed the boss. They were absolutely frustrated and like just happy that they actually managed to get past that boss. Because like it was very frustrating for them. Because they could see Limit already on Blockade, and they actually killed Blockade as well when they were progressing on Mekkatorque. So they were a lot under pressure, like.
I mean, anybody can get tilted by things like that. Especially, I felt like that people were already saying to them, like, yo, Limit is already, like, on Blockade is killed, they're on Jaina, you're stuck on Mekkatorque, what the hell is going on? Like, you're gonna lose, like, there are probably people saying stuff like that, and the pressure was there. So I can see how you can get tilted. I actually seen a lot of the stream from Mekkatorque, and I've seen people dying from that. What is that? Just a booster cannon, which was like it was a heroic mechanic. Which again, these players are like one of the best players. They are the best players in the world and stuff like that. You have to get tilted to fail on those mechanics. Do you know what I mean?
I think they were wiping to from what I've heard, they just wiping to those, backing up the colors.
Or the communication.
And the debuffs as well. Because the debuff is also pain to deal with.
Yeah, but overall, like you said, it's actually, what was your favorite boss to watch?
Obviously, I would say Jaina was definitely by far the most fun. Opulence as well. I think that's an extraordinary boss. I wish there were more bosses like that. They could split, raids.
Yeah, I love the splits as well.
Separate areas, and even the last phase, just burn until you run out of room. Like it's one of my favorite encounters. Like that type of encounters are really fun.
It's the same with me, actually. I couldn't agree more. I love when you have to split into different groups. This introduces different types of talents, introduces different types of stat priorities. All of a sudden, from like, just going from boss to boss, using the same gear, using the same stats and things like that. All of a sudden, you have to be split up. You have a different healing, as a healer, you have a different healing mentality, different talents and things like that. And it just freshens up the whole encounter or the whole dungeon or the whole raid dungeon. And I felt that was really cool. But besides that, let's talk about just quickly maybe class balance and things like that. Then I've covered a lot about this in my videos and things like that about certain classes that were really strong, certain classes that Blizzard used. Like, for example, we talked about Mythic Jaina, and we saw that 2 Resto Shamans. There's quite a few guilds that actually copied Method roster for this. There's quite a few guilds that end up using 2 Discipline Priests and 2 Resto Shamans, or at least 2 Resto Shamans for a lot of these. But
Shamans, yeah.
I guess when I said in the other videos about the range DPS, I mean, dot classes were just it was just too broken. This whole tier was for dot classes. There's so many ads to stay for a long time. I mean, what do you feel about certain tiers favoring melee ranged, like heavily favoring?
I think it's awful because range already has an advantage, even if it's like just normal single target. Like
That's such a typical melee response, but go on.
What do you mean? Range always have a huge advantage in any kind of raids. And then you also add that they can, there's multiple targets, like multiple spread out targets. That's the key thing. They're spread out, so you can't cleave as a melee. I think that's just so unfair. And honestly, look at Blockade. Literally bring 1 melee. You could technically do the same thing with Jaina. The only reason you bring Jaina, you bring melees is because the buddy system thing. Yeah, you have to have people around the tanks. That's the only reason you bring melee.
Well, a Havoc Demon Hunter for the 5% magical debuff is pretty mandatory.
That's another thing. Like, you have to have a mage and a well, not really have to have a mage, but you obviously have to have monk and a demon hunter
because of the raid buffs. I mean, I don't feel that dot classes needed a nerf. I really don't feel dot classes needed a nerf. I feel like this is the raid tier for dot classes. I am not opposed for having tiers where certain classes or type of classes prevail. Like, for example, maybe next tier is going to be melee heavy. Maybe it's going to be really good for melee DPS, and I'm fine with that. I'm honestly kind of fine with that, because I feel a lot of the time Blizzard will try to balance out every single class to feel the same, but there should be distinct advantages to being a ranged and distinct advantages to being a melee. I really feel there should be more, not even class, role fantasy to playing a melee or a ranged DPS and things like that. So I'm not crazy opposed about the fact that dot classes are a bit better, and majority of the people are not going to experience that anyways. This is only for the top 1% who are pushing every single DPS because they spend so much gold optimizing everything. They need to find the best classes. They need to
in the highest level, it's always going to be ranged. Like, you're always going to prefer ranged. Like, the only way they can fix melee range imbalance is that melee do more damage, and then they have to bring maybe some melee because they do so much damage. That's the only way we can fix it, because it's just range can do the mechanics and also do the damage as well. While melee they just there in the boss, like, that's it. Like, if they have to do some kind of mechanic to step out, they lose all the damage. Like it's in the highest level, it's always gonna be ranged preferred, and it's always gonna be like that. But in terms of, like, the dot classes, I think it's not bad. Like, they definitely don't need to nerf them. Maybe Shadow Priest could have been nerfed a bit because I think they were a bit too strong, but I think it's just that the fights were designed like that way, like that suited their dot class. I don't think they initially meant to, make the dot classes OP from the raid mechanics. Like,
I think they knew what they were doing. I think the raid design team, every time they add an additional ad that lives for quite a while and things like that, or that is completely spread out. That's like, for example, like, ads that spawn in the other side of the room. Stockade, Gronk, the monkey boss.
It's been like almost every single boss was like that. That's a bit weird.
But I mean, when they make, that's the thing. When they make these kind of mechanics, they have to be like, okay, melee are gonna have a hard time going from this position to the end of the room, while ranged dot classes can dot on a boss, dot on an ad, increases their single target damage. It's all good. Like, they have to be aware of that fact. So I honestly think that they kind of wanted to make this a bit ranged friendly, I'm honestly, I feel like maybe the next raid tier it should be more melee friendly to account for the fact that Uldir was a weird class balance, because for Zulfight you saw like 6 sub rogues, and then for Mythic Mitrax you saw very little amount of melee. So it was a really, but then again, Mythic Fetid Devour was again melee not friendly. So you could argue the fact that Uldir was maybe a little bit more range friendly, but not to the same extent as Battle of Dazar'alor. I feel Battle of Dazar'alor, majority of the fights will like you can see at the charts as well. There's a majority of them are ranged, and like the only other range classes that are doing really well is like Havoc Demon Hunter, because they actually get invited for the top end content. Rogues are doing pretty well. Red Paladins are here. What are they doing here? Dude, this is wrong. They need to. This is not where Red Paladins are supposed to be. They're supposed to be somewhere here. Okay, just give it a week or two. This is going to be fixed. This is an error. It's an error on Blizzard's part. This needs to go down, way down. But I guess we covered the range melee kind of thing. We covered method. We covered world top guilds and the preparation that they needed. I don't know if there's anything else that needs to be covered. I don't know if there's any other mechanic that you feel is insanely broken or was cheesed or something very interesting that happened. Can you think of anything? I think this is covered quite a lot.
It was an interesting raid. I say it's, it wasn't balanced that well, like in terms of it was a bit too easy. But I can't really say because I didn't raid. But from watching the bosses itself, like, and obviously these are like top level guilds, but I watched other streams as well, more casual guilds. And for example, your progress, you're at 6 or 8, is it?
A bit more casual guilds, okay, but go on. Yes.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
6 out of 9.
Raid
6
every
out of
day?
9.
It seems like it's easier than the other previous raids, like. Like you said, it compares to old not what's the raid, last expansion, the last tier, and Taurus, yeah. It compares very similar to that kind of raid.
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant. It compares exactly to Taurus, except for the fact that Agramar was a pretty decent. It was way harder than the other bosses, and then you had
to admit,
Argus.
You have to remember that Taurus was the last tier, like, of the expansion. Like it should have definitely been harder, considering obviously it was a huge, like, it was under tune, like the heroic, for the first time ever they buffed it. It was too easy. Like they never ever, Blizzard never buffs a raid after the first, like, reset, and they actually did it. They buffed heroic.
Yeah, because they made blockade. They made blockade too easy. I think that was the only reason they tried to fix some of the blockade bugs, because blockade was super broken at the start, and it was actually really hard for normal and heroic people to do. The ads were spawning all over the place. So what they did, I can't remember. They reduced everything, and then after they reduced everything, Blizzard was like, "Hey, we made the second boss in this tier far too easy. We're bringing it up a bit." So I don't feel that counts as a buff. I feel that counts as a bug issues, because there were a lot of bugs. Like, honestly,
you have to remember that initially the whole raid was supposed to be that Jaina was going to be the last boss for Horde, and for Alliance is going to be Rastakhan. That's what it was initially designed. So you would have different end bosses. That's how it was initially designed. Only on PTR they changed their mind, and basically tuned it like Jaina is the last boss and for everyone. So
I guess has to make it more fair as well, because having two different bosses and things like that is going to be impossible to manage in terms of, like, world first and things like that. But I'm looking forward to the next raid. I'm looking forward to the streams from them. I don't think Limit is gonna stream this. I think I'm not sure what's gonna happen, to be completely honest. But I do hope there's going to be more guilds streaming this world first race, and there's going to be more backup from Blizzard to actually really incorporate it. Like, I think it's been a big success. I think in terms of PvE tournaments, this is one of the biggest PvE tournaments out of any game out there. Can you think of any bigger PvE player versus environment tournament on Twitch in any games?
Red Bull Gaming Sphere, they bring in six players from Method, and they have cameras everywhere, their points of view. And then they have the commentators, analysts, like Preach, like well-known characters in World of Warcraft community. Preach, who else was there? Preach, Hothead, Bay, Like it was amazing. Like, and the commenters did such a great job. Like during the whole meta stream, like they were entertaining, and Rich Campbell was crazy. But he legitimately is like. It seems like he's like drunk like all the time. Like I'm not even joking. Like he seems like he's completely drunk like the whole time. And it's funny. Like it was like entertaining. Like
I really liked it. I really liked it as well. So I think this is gonna be a wrap up. I think if people watch the whole video, this is probably gonna be quite long, way longer than expected. I really like to hear your opinions on these type of videos. If you want to see more of these type of videos, if you want to see this type of format, this more podcasted discussion type of thing, it's a bit more informal. It's a bit more, just talking about some of the crazy strats, crazy things happening in World of Warcraft. There's a couple of other topics that I could have covered today. They were kind of controversial to do with like wildcard gaming and things like that, but I really don't want to make this video too long, and I feel those kind of topics are a little bit subjective in a lot of ways, and I don't know the exact. I don't know whether it's true or not. That's the basic thing. So I don't want to cover it today. But let me know if you do enjoy this, and if you want to see more of this type of content. And I thank you, Paperkut, to coming down, to helping out with some of the discussion. And hopefully I'll see you next time.